I've never really talked about Kickstarter on here because, this is a store's YouTube channel, and a lot of stores see Kickstarter as competition, and a lot of stores don't really like competition because they then have to compete, and then their prices go down, and they think they make less money overall. And I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment. And then there's the opposite sentiment. The original store YouTube was Dirium's, and he was all about competition. He loved competing for the lowest price. And I didn't necessarily understand that, and I still don't. I understand Alpha Investment's point of view that if he sells a large enough volume, and even though his margins are low, that he makes a lot more money with a larger volume, and it's not that much more work because you're already doing all that shipping anyway, and it scales. So I understand it a little bit better now, but I'm not anti-competition nor so pro-competition that I'd go out of my way to achieve it. But Kickstarter, to a lot of game store owners, is an anathema, and a lot of stores wouldn't touch Kickstarter. There are many stores, and these are the big successful stores, that do back Kickstarters as retailers and then bring in Kickstarters into the store. And so I've backed Kickstarter as personally, and then I've also backed it as a retailer. The experience is about the same, slightly different depending on the Kickstarter. And each of these game manufacturers do interact with retailers in different ways. There's less communication, certainly, when you're a retailer and you're backing a Kickstarter. Maybe it's because I'm not backing at a high volume level, like I'm not backing for $10,000 or $20,000 worth of product, so maybe there'd be better communication. But it just seems like I guess technically it's better because I think they're more quick to respond to emails directly, and also their updates that everyone else gets apply to you as well for the most part, but they don't. Not entirely, because you're backing as a retailer, so when you pay for it and when you order it is at a different time than when regular Kickstarters pay for it and order it, for the most part. There are some Kickstarters that are kind of annoying that don't charge you before shipping. They charge you at the end of the Kickstarter as a retailer, which is not how most things work for a retailer. Retailers generally pay when stuff is getting shipped out, and a lot of retailers don't pay until 45 days after that or 60 days after that, right? So an upfront ask is for something that is unproven is a bit much for a lot of retailers. So that might be another reason why they don't want to back Kickstarters, but also because they're unknown quantities, because at least through distribution, they're a known quantity. It's hard to get into distribution, so they're being vetted and gate kept. And then a lot of them have been, have had great sales for years, whether it's that specific game or other games within that company. So the stores can see that there's a good sales record, so there's a good chance that they bring it in, they can sell it. And so for the stores that do bring in Kickstarters, it's a bit of a risk for them, right? And that's why I say the majority of stores are not going to touch Kickstarter at all. So, you're not likely to walk into your local store and see some Kickstarters on the shelf. My store, I got a few, but a lot of stores my size generally don't ever have Kickstarters. It's just because a friend of mine is really big into Kickstarter, and there happened to be a Kickstarter that I was interested in, which was a Batman board game. That's lower down on this shelf, but anyway, there's a Batman board game, and then I got kind of addicted to Kickstarter, as people do get addicted to Kickstarter, and it culminated in buying a wormwood table, right? And wormwood dice and that kind of stuff, and I really like wormwood. Maybe I'll do a video talking about wormwood in the future, and I don't know if I'm necessarily going to make a video of showing off the table because I don't have a lot of the accessories. I got the topper, I've got the whatever the divider thing is, and a couple of cup holders and a bottle cap opener, a bottle opener. Yeah, but anyway, so the Kickstarter stuff is iffy for board game stores, and they're not likely to back it, so they don't really talk about it. So it's not surprising that a YouTuber who's a store owner isn't going to talk about it, and I think I might be the first to talk about Kickstarter. But now we're in this part where, because of the tariffs, a lot of people on Kickstarter have pulled back because the prices are going to be going up massively, and a lot of the board game manufacturers who have either suspended operations or collapsed or are about to collapse, most of those are coming from Kickstarter, because a lot of the Kickstarter economy is based on you get a bunch of stuff, money from a Kickstarter that pays for the previous Kickstarter that you did, because you spend the money right away, right? And I think that a lot of these game manufacturers aren't necessarily real businesses, because they aren't planning ahead. They're just planning for the short term. And when you plan for the short term and then something crazy happens like tariffs and you're only reactionary, well, then your company is going to fall apart. And we saw actually with Mythic Games, and this wasn't even due to the pandemic. This might have been due to shipping costs and stuff like that. But it was due to the way that Mythic Games operated. I had to pay extra for Six Siege because they couldn't produce Six Siege without more money, because the shipping prices had gone up, but also probably because they planned improperly and they used the money that they got from Six Siege to pay for a previous Kickstarter that came out. And then every other game that Mythic would put out, they kept asking their backers for more money. And that's like, that hadn't happened in board game Kickstarters, and so people hadn't expected it, but it was something that was likely to happen on a thing like Kickstarter, that you're going to give them money up front and they're not going to give you the thing for 6 months to 3 years. And in that time, things may fluctuate, and then they may ask you for more money. And they also can't regulate their cash flow on a 3-year cycle. Like if they were only doing a Kickstarter once every 3 years, so they got to do a Kickstarter every 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And so because of that, you're now seeing, because things are crazy and everything is on Kickstarter, for the most part, is made in China, that's where they're the canaries in the coal mine. So when you start seeing games having problems, or games manufacturers having problems, the first problems you're going to start seeing is on Kickstarter. So, I mean, even if you don't like Kickstarter and you're a store who doesn't like Kickstarter, I would start paying attention to Kickstarter, because it may tell you what the future may bring for the rest of the products that go on your shelf, right? So there is something to it, even if you're not interested in it. However, I guess I'll talk at the end of this video, just like, the things that I like about Kickstarter is the way that they present the projects, right? And you have, their little explanations and some videos, and then at the very end, there's all the different YouTubers, influencers that have reviewed the game. And then in between, there's like, this is what the concept art is, and this is what some of the samples are, and this is what you get for backing it at this level, this is what you get for backing it at that level. And then there's additional things that get unlocked as more people pledge. The more money they make, the more things will happen. Like, they'll have extra stuff that will come with your Kickstarter, and that's always exciting, the extra stuff. Even though technically, they could have had that stuff happen anyway, and this is more of a surprise gift type thing that you already paid for. But it's exciting, it's fun. Kickstarters are great, and they have the chance to innovate more, because the things that people like on Kickstarter are all these extra things. And for instance, the best example is the minis games, like all these giant minis and massive amounts of minis that are in board games on Kickstarter that were not in board games in general through distribution. But because of Kickstarter and what excited people on Kickstarter, then made it so that the game manufacturers that were on Kickstarter started including more and bigger minis games, right? And while I don't like purely minis games, like I'm not interested in Zombicide at all, really, the Come On model is kind of a Kickstarter thing. And now there's other people that make games in the way that Come On does, and they're not necessarily on Kickstarter. But it kind of influenced where the game industry was going. But now we're in a lull for tabletop games, and the lull had already started before the tariffs, and when you add that to increasing prices 2 or 3 times, it's not going to be good for Kickstarter board game manufacturers that's their primary model, because I don't think people on Kickstarter want to pay those prices, because a lot of the Kickstarter stuff is that it is a very cheap place to get board games. Like, I think in general, it's more expensive to buy them at a local store, at a friendly local game store, than it is to buy them on Kickstarter. So a lot of people are drawn there for the savings, right? And also for the extras. Even if it's not cheaper, you're getting a lot of extras that you wouldn't get at a retail. So once they move prices up, that's a large portion of the people that are backers on Kickstarter, and they're going to, roach out. They're going to be gone, right? So that's going to happen. And then, you've decreased sales and you've increased your costs, and it's, again, like I said, not going to be good, but they're going to be canaries on a coal mine. So you should watch Kickstarter, and then maybe in the future you might actually see something that you like on Kickstarter if you're a game store owner, or you're someone who's never tried Kickstarter before. But right now, I think it's a little too volatile to recommend backing stuff on Kickstarter, because you don't know what the real price is going to be until it lands in wherever it lands during the trade war. However, by the time it comes out, it could be 6 months to 2 years from now, so maybe everything will have settled down. But the thing is, you don't really know. But I don't know. I really like Kickstarter. I think it's not, I don't think it ever should have replaced the model that we have, because I think that the distribution model is just better, and that, you're a real manufacturer if you're going through that process rather than the Kickstarter process. Like, you're more likely to be a stable entity, because Kickstarter is too volatile. But it's great. It has its place. It's an exciting thing when you back Kickstarters. And I don't back nearly as many Kickstarters, and in fact, I haven't backed a Kickstarter in probably 8 to 9 months now, and I'm probably not going to back any Kickstarters for another year or two. But I think that once things settle down, you should check out Kickstarter. But let me know what you think. Are you a big Kickstarter backer? Are you a super backer? Are you someone who doesn't know anything about Kickstarter and maybe wants some explanation to Kickstarter itself? Because I could make a video like that if you're interested, but let me know. Have a good day.